Thank you for waiting and welcome to this online event from Pearson. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items so you will know how to participate in today's event. Before we discuss how to use the platform, I would like to inform you that this session will be recorded for regulatory purposes and for quality assurance. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter anytime by typing your questions into the Q&A option located at the menu at the bottom of the screen. You can also use the chat box, which is located at the bottom right of your screen. You may also interact with the presenters on the same chat box. The chat box is for sharing ideas with the whole group, and anything you type into this window can immediately be seen by other delegates in the room. To enter a question or comment, type it into the bottom section of the chat window and hit enter on your keyboard. You may also use the same chat box for assistance in case you encounter any technical issues in viewing or listening to the webinar content. To queue for questions, click on Raise Hand at the menu bar at the bottom. If you don't see this, click on the icon labeled Participants and select Raise Hand. Otherwise, try holding Alt and the letter Y on your keyboard. Okay, that's all I need to go through for now. Our presenter for today is Jon Wolton. So it's with great pleasure that I hand over to him now. Jon, please go ahead.
Thanks, Gino, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thanks for taking time today at the start of what is, again, looking like another challenging year. Certainly, start of the year, getting to where everyone is today, and everyone back in centre, and teaching and learning, and potentially doing some assessing is obviously a huge effort. So thanks everyone for taking time out to come and listen to this. I'm trying to give you a bit of an update, really. I mean, a lot of this information you will be aware of already, hopefully. And I'll start with what I think is perhaps the newest information, which is about the contingency arrangements for 2022, should they need to be implemented. Now, obviously, things are looking slightly different than they were before, back in November and December, in terms of perhaps where the trajectory of exams in summer 2022. So hopefully these contingencies are not going to be needed. But obviously the plan is that these are prepared. Everyone is prepared in case they are. So that's why we're focusing on that first today, and then I'll recap about the changes to assessments for 2022 as well after that, just to kind of make sure that's the top of everyone's mind as we finish. Now, the idea is that we can have plenty of questions today. I've got lots of kind of FAQs in this, so hopefully I'll answer many of them during the presentation. But if you do have a question that isn't covered off or it's very specific, then you can drop it in the Q&A, as Gino said. And I've got some breaks, little pauses in the presentation, just for me to kind of scan down and look at those and answer them. And I'll probably answer them over the microphone like this, rather than try and type, because I'm just on my own today. I haven't got colleagues with me to do kind of questions in the background, which I know is something that we've done in the past. So let's have a quick look at the contents for today, or the agenda. So as I mentioned, I'm going to have a look at the summer 2022 contingency arrangements for UK qualifications first, and then mention the grading arrangements, what we know of it, and then look at the changes in a bit more detail in terms of for assessments for GCSE and AS and A-level. So finishing up there with just a little update on 2021 autumn series, as you can see at the end. I've got some slides about the support available for each of those, sort of weaved throughout. So if any of your questions about what support there is for any of this, then obviously hopefully you can pick those up from those slides. So if we start with looking at the contingency arrangements then. So, I mean, as I mentioned, the expectation now, and increasingly so, is very much that exams will take place this summer. But obviously, this time round, contingency plans were publicly kind of laid out for everyone, so that everybody's aware what's going to happen if exams are cancelled, which is increasingly unlikely. And the DFE and Ofqual ran that consultation back in October, and the outcomes you can read if you'd like, but we're going to look at them in a bit more detail now. So as you know, it's going to be teacher assessed grades, which is similar to what we did last year if there are no exams. And Ofqual's published some guidance on how the evidence for those teacher assessed grades is going to be collected and used. And that guidance is available for everyone to see, and that's what we're going to be looking at in a bit more detail for the first half of this session. And the idea is that although you're collecting that evidence now, or you're being asked to start collecting that evidence now, it's not that we're determining or generating teacher assessed grades at this point in time. We're only going to do that, or we're only going to ask teachers to do that if exams are cancelled. Okay. Gino's put the materials in the chat so you can download. They might look slightly different to this. If they do, don't worry. The content's the same. They're just slides might be in a slightly different order. So the first sort of question I've got here is one of the ones I've been asked quite a lot is what conditions would these assessments for contingency be taken? And so the assessment should be very much like exam conditions wherever possible. So, for example, students shouldn't know before the assessment the questions that they're going to answer. They should work independently and not be assisted, other than obviously, where you've got reasonable adjustments in place. They shouldn't have access to books or revision notes, and the assessment should be timed and supervised. So very much sort of exam conditions. They can be done in a classroom rather than an exam hall setting, though. So it's more like a sort of controlled assessment. Centres should try and assess students all at the same time on the same qualification using the same material. And if you can't do that because kids are off or what have you, staff are off, you can use different materials, but at different times. So there's not an opportunity for students to understand or predict exactly what questions are going to be in those assessments. It's not possible to do that, then as long as the students are assessed broadly at the same time over the same range of content using the same style of assessment, then that's fine, as long as you're not using the same questions for each group, so that it can't kind of say, oh, in that assessment this comes up and this question comes up. That's also fine. Obviously, there are some exceptions. If you've got private candidates who haven't covered the same content perhaps as your main cohort, they might need to have a slightly different assessment for them, or a student that's joined the centre later might be a one-off where you have to set different questions because they haven't covered the whole course. As I mentioned, reasonable adjustments for students are fine where they're usually permitted, and for candidates who have those needs, that's absolutely fine. Okay, when should you assess the students for the contingency, the gathering of evidence for the tags, should they be needed? So ideally, should be 3 assessments identified to inform the tags, and they should be spread over the remaining of the academic year. Now, you may have already done something in November, or you're certainly probably planning to do something now at the beginning of this term, in the midst of preparing for those mocks. And then it could be something again in the first half of the summer term. And then obviously any other normal assessment points, you can use evidence from those towards tags if needed. We don't have non-exam assessment in GCSE, but in A-level, where you've got non-examined assessment and examined assessment, you would probably want to consider the balance of exam and NEA when deciding how many occasions students would be assessed. Now, you may, for some good reason, take a different approach to this. For example, students or the nature of your provision might mean that this isn't possible, and that's fine. You just have to provide a rationale for the different approach if exams are cancelled. Some centres might have already assessed their students before the October half term. That's also fine. So that's around when you should assess them, but how long should you assess students for, or how many assessments? So the total assessment time you should aim for should not significantly exceed the total time students would be spending taking exams for the qualification. So you just have to look at the planned duration for the GCSE, which is the same as normal, and the planned duration for the A-level exams, which is the same as normal, and the AS, which I think is also the same. Might be slightly, we might have reduced one of the papers actually on AS, but in terms of time. So look for the total time, and that's how much assessment you should be aiming to do for the tags. This does mean that they are not required to sit a full set of papers every session or every 3 times this year. That would be considered perhaps over-assessment. Just think about the opportunities to schedule those assessments and how those together would provide evidence from broadly the same proportion of specification that would be normally done in the exam. And most teachers, I imagine, will be using kind of past papers and things like that. One thing to note is that students should only be assessed on the content they've been taught. So the assessments, the package of assessments that you plan when taken together you shouldn't be assessing them on content they've not been able to cover for whatever reason. But it should be a wide range of content similar to what would be expected for their summer exams, because obviously those are very likely to go ahead. So we want to use these assessments as to prepare them for the probable eventuality of the actual exams, but we do need that fallback contingency as well. So they should be as useful as possible for students preparing to take summer exams. So therefore, and I'm sure this is what you're doing, they should be full exam papers or parts of exam papers that they're already preparing to take this summer. Past papers then, can be used in full, as I say, or you can chop and change them, mix up the sections, mix up the questions where appropriate. If required, like for example, because you've already used all the past papers, you can combine different papers from different series, and this is what we recommend. So you could do paper 1 from June 2019, paper 2 from June 2018, or you could combine questions from past papers to generate a kind of new, less predictable assessment. So what you don't want to do is give them paper 1, paper 2, and paper 3 all from 2019 or all from 2018, because those students may be very familiar with the sequence of questions. And although we're aware that students may have seen these questions before because they're in the public domain and you may have used them in class and things, you want to provide an assessment that isn't predictable to the level that they can prepare for what's coming up to that level. They obviously may be familiar with the questions that are in past papers. If you develop your own assessments, obviously you need to do that so that they're very similar in style to the exam papers, and obviously you mark them very much in line with the exam board's approach to marking. For the A level, if you're doing assessments after the advance notice, so the advance information is published, which is still planned for the 7th of February, then you'll need to take that into account when deciding how to assess students, to make sure they're aware of the fact that they've done so, that they know some of the questions, the material that's going to be in those assessments. Okay. Should you tell your students then about these assessments and when they're scheduled? So yes, after the 11th of November last year, which is when this guidance was first published, students must actually be told before they take each assessment that their performance could be used to determine a teacher assessed grade if exams are cancelled. And you need to give them this information, far enough in advance so they can have time to revise and prepare. That is used towards teacher assessed grade. The student will be told then which parts of the subject content will be covered by the assessment. Obviously, as I said before, they shouldn't know what the questions are going to be in advance, or they shouldn't really be able to predict the questions from the information you give them. So that means students shouldn't be, being assessed using past papers from, as I said, one particular year. They should be chopped and changed so that students wouldn't know exactly what's coming up. It might be necessary, for example, if a student misses some of these contingency or assessments because of illness, that students wouldn't know that they are going to be assessed, obviously, towards the tag, because you might have to use some work from previous to November the 11th to inform their teacher assessed grade, but that would be the exception if they missed a planned assessment. Can students resit the assessments? No, so students shouldn't be given any opportunity to repeat an assessment to improve their mark based on any feedback. And when you mark the assessments, you obviously would use our published mark board, mark schemes and the guidance around those, examine the feedback and what have you. You can give students feedback, including their marks or comments, and you can tell them what grades they're performing at. However, you have to make it clear that this is not the teacher assessment grades, because obviously we will tell you how to determine the grades for teacher assessment grades. We'll give you more guidance if and when exams are cancelled. And obviously you need to give them the caveat that their marking and grading hasn't been kind of quality checked by the exam board. But I'm sure you're used to doing that anyway when you do mocks and things. You do have to keep the work, and students can be given copies if that's useful for their assessment for learning. In terms of the A-level NEA, oh yes, that original student work has to be obviously kept securely, just so you know, and obviously that might be required if there's any kind of appeals later down the line. With the A-level NEA, obviously we're expecting exams to go ahead, so we're expecting that to be marked by yourselves and moderated by us as usual, and then obviously combined with students' exam marks to generate their grades. If the exams are cancelled, then like in 2021, teachers will be expected to continue, or students should continue the NEA, and obviously use that as part of the evidence towards their teacher assessed grade. There's a couple of links there to further support, but I'm going to just have a look now and take some questions. So let me just have a look. Yeah, so we'll share the presentation afterwards. If you haven't already got it, I can share it. If you can email me, teachinggeography@pearson.com, teachinggeography@pearson.com, and I'll send you the presentation. You keep the work until after the appeals process is over. The kind of appeals process goes on into the autumn, the following autumn. Can you confirm if you need to submit a fieldwork form this year? So this year, I'll come on to this later, but yeah, no, you don't have to declare the fieldwork statement for GCSE, AS or A level. So there's no requirement to submit that. And that was the same 2021. Obviously exams were cancelled, but yeah, there's no requirement to do that. Do we have any ideas on when the decision will be made about whether we're doing exams or tags? No idea at all. Obviously the next milestone is the 7th of Feb, which is the release of advanced information, which impacts us at A-level, but it impacts a lot of other subjects at GCSE as well. We don't have it at GCSE because we've got that new optionality. So I think, I mean, I don't think we'll want to have to cancel exams once that advanced information is published, because obviously that will compromise a whole set of exams, because that'll be, people will know what's in them essentially, or know what content's going to be assessed. So I think if we get over the 7th of February publication of the advanced information, logically it suggests to me that exams will go ahead. Obviously, where are we? Not actually that far off, are we? Where is it now? 17th. So yeah, that's not policy. That's just me extrapolating from the fact that if you release advanced information, then you have every intention for exams to go ahead. Obviously, can't guarantee, because if something terrible happens between 7th of Feb and the summer, like I don't know, all sorts of things, a new variant or new data, new evidence suggesting that restrictions need to be increased, or teacher absence goes through the roof, student absence goes through the roof, then obviously that's a decision for the DFE. But that's just how I would think about it. So David's asking about the nature of the A-level advanced information. I'm going to come to that in a minute. So if you just hold on, I'll talk you through that. Can you clarify the statement, students should be told which parts of the subject content will be covered? Yeah. So essentially, you can tell them what topics are covered. So like if they're going into paper 1 in a normal year in Spec B, they would know they were doing hazards and urbanisation and development, or as in this case, would be doing either urbanisation or development. So as long as they know, what to revise, essentially, that's fine. What you can't tell them is give them like advance notice, tell them what content to revise for what question. So you just give them the same knowledge that they would know if they were going in. Obviously, if you're chopping and changing questions, you're not assessing certain topics because they haven't covered them yet. Then obviously you can tell them that you can tell them that they don't need to look at that, because you might be assessing that at a later date. Is it okay to use lock papers all from the same series if we go to tags? So that's an interesting one. I think it's okay to do that. It's not. So just to let you know, the 2020 papers are going to be unlocked. Sorry, November 2020 papers are going to be unlocked tomorrow, and that's across all the exam boards. That's a decision made across all the boards, and it kind of links to this question. Really, is that when you have locked papers, some people are able to access them through buying them on the internet, parents getting hold of someone, teacher with a password. There's all sorts of ways that some students can get hold of them, and therefore it's essentially a bit unfair if other students can't access them and some students can pay for them or get someone to get them. So they're not really secure, they're not really locked. They're locked, but they're still in the public domain. So I think the decision then driven by, Ofqual, DFE and the boards is that they want that's not fair, and so that they want to have them as more stuff unlocked because of the tax situation. So, and the contingency situation. So those will be unlocked tomorrow. The November 2021 papers will be unlocked, but somewhere in the summer or closer to the summer. I don't exactly know when. I've heard around Easter being talked about, but it might be after that. So I think it's still best not to do that, not to use the whole locked set, if you can avoid it. I think it's okay if that's what you want to do, but I think you just have to be wary that if some students have by hook or crook managed to get access to those, and you tell them they're going to get paper 1, paper 2 and paper 3 from 2020 or 2021 November, then if they have been able to source them, then they'll know the questions. Whereas if you chop them, mix them up a little bit with some other stuff, then it's less predictable. So you're going to hopefully assess what they know and understand rather than what they've kind of prepared for in terms of knowing what the questions are. It's less easily for them to predict. This is my first year teaching A-levels and this course. Do we know what kind of advanced information will be given? Yeah, I'll talk you through that in a minute. Autumn 2020 online training stated that NEA would be more generously graded in 2021. Is the same happening for 2022? So you guys mark the NEA. So I think you just have to mark it against your, the standard that you're familiar with, and then overall, as I'll talk about later, outcomes in 2022 will be between 2019 and 2020. So they will be more generous than 2019, but not quite as generous as 2020, which was the tags. So that will be taken care of in the sort of grade boundaries that we set for the NEA and the exams in 2022. So yes, it will be more generous overall, but as far as your marking, you just have to mark it to the standard. You're not grading it, you're giving it a mark based on the quality, on the mark scheme, and the sort of standard that you're familiar with. Hope that makes sense. If an individual student is unable to sit the exams in the summer due to COVID isolation, will it go on tags? I don't know the answer to that. That's a good question. It could go on tags for a student. It could go on. It could well do. I don't know the answer to that, Sue. But I suspect it will be very much dependent on what the policy is there around isolation by that time. Obviously, we don't quite know what the isolation period will be in the summer. So let's wait and see. But so I can't say whether it will be tags or some other kind of mitigation. If students are absent due to isolating for COVID for internally assessed exams, but are well enough to join a Zoom and complete their assessment online, would it be acceptable as evidence for tags? Or would protocol be here? So it has to be supervised. So I think, I think you'd need to be certain that they were supervised. That's all I can say around that. Whether you wait and they do it a different time when they're back, where they can be kind of sat somewhere and seen, or whether you can do it remotely via Zoom. That could be an option. Do you mean do it from home, have them logged on at Zoom? Possible, but I don't know how you would mitigate against them looking at books and revision notes and things. So it's probably not going to be the best to do it that way. You probably need to have them in the room. When are mark schemes published for November 2021 GCSE? They are 18th of January. Yeah, 18th of January. Is that tomorrow? It is, yeah, tomorrow, mark schemes. Can A-level NEA mark grades be given to students pre-exam? So you shouldn't really give A-level grades because you don't necessarily know what they are, because obviously we use the grade boundaries. We set the grade boundaries every year, so you can obviously tell them. You can tell them their mark, and you can tell them that in 2019 that would have given them a certain grade. But obviously, again, it's a linear exam, so we don't grade individual papers. It's just you add up the total mark, and then there's overall mark is then the grade boundaries are set at the subject level. So it's, to say someone's a grade on a piece of coursework it might not be that helpful, because it's not going to, it's just the mark is helpful because it just shows them how many marks they've got towards their overall mark total. Okay, thank you, some helpful responses there. Okay, there's a few more questions in the Q&A, but I'm going to move on and then come back to those at the end or a bit later. Okay, so the grading I've just touched on, actually. So we'll set the 22 grade boundaries based on a profile that reflects the midpoint between 2021 and 2019. Results will be higher than in 2019, but not as high as 2020, which was their first year of teacher assessed grades. And obviously the exact position will vary by subject. Obviously, we've got additional measures at GCSE Geography with the optionality and the advanced information at A-level. And the plan is for results in 2023 that results are back in line with those before the pandemic. So this is a kind of halfway, what they call a soft landing in 2022. What grade boundaries should be used for the marking contingency papers? So I guess it follows then from that first thing to say, don't use any of the November series grade boundaries, so the 2020 or 2021 November series grade boundaries, because the entries for those, the cohort that sat those, was so small that those boundaries are not necessarily reflective of the whole nation, or the whole cohort, I should say. We might have had a handful of very bright students or a handful of very low ability students resit those in November, and therefore the grade boundaries are going to be massively skewed by that small sample. So don't use any November boundaries, just to warn you. I would use, the only thing you can use is the 2019 grade boundaries, and just see those as probably a little bit harsh for 2022. So err on the side of generosity. So if you've got students on the border line of a kind of 2 grades, or 2 grade boundaries, I should say, 2 grades, then obviously you can err on the side of leniency. And obviously this is just for students, for feedback, for their mocks and things. You can use these. If we go to tags, we'll obviously issue different guidance. At the moment, this is just about getting the planning in place for the assessments in case there's a contingency, and obviously making them useful for now, for the assumption that exams will go ahead. So that's everything on contingency. I'm just going to look at the questions now to see if there's any other contingencies. My concern is student wellbeing. If we're preparing for tags and end up doing the actual exams with 2 years we've had. So I think the way to see it is that it's just do these assessments, build them into your normal assessments as you would be doing as you're preparing for the exams. It's just that we're giving a structure around it to try and make it a little bit more consistent across centres, so that if it does go to tags, that those tags in 2022 would be, it has moved a bit forward on from 2020 and 2021 in terms of how they're derived and the kind of the way they're being they should be done. There's slightly more consistency than last year and the year before. So that's why we're saying don't do any more than what they would normally do in an exam, and you don't have to do anything special. Just build it into your normal assessment and your normal kind of mocks, if you like. I've mentioned grading. We've mentioned lock papers. Sorry, I'm just looking down the list. I'm going to talk about the pre-release or the advanced information. Examiner contracts. There's a question about examiner contracts. So they'll all be released or sent out by mid-Feb. I know quite a lot of you have been asking about this. So what happens with those is you have to wait. You can't release the contracts until the exam papers are passed for press. And so if there's any delay on an exam paper with like getting that signed off, then that won't trigger the examiner contract. So I know that hasn't happened yet. So once that happens, the examiner contracts will go out, and we're aiming for mid-Feb for that. I've answered Sue's question. Yeah, I think a lot of these are coming already. Okay, excellent. Cool. Okay. So yeah, somebody's asking, Gillian's asking, is A-level the only one which will have advanced information? Yes, A-level and AS, of course. Now the poor old AS is still there, believe it or not, and that'll have advanced information as well if any of you still do AS. Summer 2022 then. So this is about the adaptations for the exam papers, which you should all be aware of by now, but it's good to have an update and an opportunity to answer questions if you need to. Summer support page has got most of the information, or all of the information on that's in this presentation. There's a general qualifications bulletin, which gives you kind of the latest news. It's not subject specific, but it gives you all the generic stuff like I've been going through just now. Sign up for that. There's FAQs on there. The subject page has got an article on there about contingency and 22 exams. If you go to Edexcel, Pearson Edexcel website, look up geography subject, you can find that. Sign up to my updates. So lots of people got sort of removed from that list over the last couple of years due to the way that it was set up with our marketing preferences and things like that, data protection. So if you haven't received those for a while, then that's probably why you've probably been bumped off the list. So do sign up again if in doubt. You can click through that link. If I send you this, it should be live in the presentation. If not, if you Google Subject Advisor email updates at Edexcel, you should get to a form which you fill out online, and that should give you access to that. So each qualification page has a rather hidden Summer 2022 support tab, which gives you all of the information about the adaptations for Summer 2022 for each qualification, and a link through to all the support materials. And there's quite a lot of them already, particularly for the GCSEs, which have the biggest number of adaptations. So if you haven't seen that tab, definitely worth going there as soon as you can. Let's have a quick look at those. Now, I realise we will have people here that teach A-level and not GCSE, and GCSE and not A-level and teach GCSE A and not GCSE B, and vice versa. So I will rattle through these on the assumption that everybody is pretty much aware of these by now, but it just gives you a chance to ask any questions if you're not sure. So with GCSE, we've got a choice of topics through some new optionality introduced. As somebody asked earlier, there's no requirement to conduct field work on 2 occasions and declare that to us. And we've removed fieldwork questions that ask them about their own familiar fieldwork experience. So at the moment, in a normal year, in GCSE, you get 18 marks of familiar questions asking them about their own investigation, and 18 marks of fieldwork questions based on unfamiliar contexts and data, resources, scenarios, that sort of thing, across the human and physical. We've removed the familiar questions, so that's gone down from 36 marks to 20 marks, 10 marks, 10 marks on human, 10 marks on physical, and it's all based on the novel contexts, not on their own fieldwork investigation. And this only applies to 2022. So in 2021, we also planned for the fieldwork, as you all remember, and obviously the exams were cancelled. And then in 2022, we had an additional mitigation allowed, which was for centres to be able to choose, or teachers to be able to choose a topic and not deliver or not assess one of the topics in the exam. And that was consulted on, and there was a high level of support for it. And the idea was there were other things that we talked about we could do with exam papers, but the idea was to keep them as similar as possible so that all of the materials could be used for practice. Students were familiar with them as much as possible. So it was a minimum change, but try and reduce the content and revision burden for 2022, because students had missed out on so much teaching and learning and exam preparation practice. So in Geography A then, paper 2 is where that's happening. The students will answer topic 4, changing cities, and then either global development or resource management. And there you can see the structure. Reduction of marks, then from 94 to 64 on that paper is a whole topic, and a whole question of 30 marks is not going to be assessed any longer. The compulsory section A was where the SPAG will sit. It used to sit at on the options, but it'll be moved to the compulsory section. The exam key, what is causing quite a lot of questions is the exam duration is going to stay the same. People kind of assumed, ignore that stuff about it being provisional, by the way, at the top. That's from an old slide, beg your pardon. So the duration is going to be the same, even though we've lost 30 marks. Some colleagues have said, oh, it's a mark a minute usually, or there or thereabouts. So if we lost 30 minutes, again, we did think about that, and we thought, well, let's just keep it the same. Students were familiar with it. If they've got the extra time, that can only be beneficial. The new rubrics, the slightly different layout of the paper, they can just focus on answering the questions rather than worrying about having to kind of adapt to the new time, especially when you've got you've not been able to practice perhaps as much as you could in a normal year. It's probably best to kind of keep things the same. Everything else is the same. On Spec B, then the new optionality comes in paper 1, where everybody does the hazards, and then you choose either development or urbanisation. Again, exactly the same as Spec A. You're losing 30 marks as you lose a whole topic. So it'd be out of 64. And then again, the exam duration is going to stay the same, and the question types and everything stays the same. Have we got any questions about optionality? So we've got a question about fieldwork, asking whether the unfamiliar fieldwork will be structured in the same way as the previous unfamiliar. Concern that students have not done any fieldwork. So yes, essentially, yeah. There's 2 or 3 example papers on how it'll be structured, but essentially, it'll look very familiar to you. So it'll be, set around a scenario. If anything, there will be more of a scenario, because obviously we can't assume anyone's done any fieldwork. So there'll probably be more information there to support students than in previous years, because we can't assume anyone knows anything about anything unless it's kind of prescribed in the specification. So yes, those will be based on that. Very familiar. There'll be 1 8-mark question across the physical and the human. So that means you don't know whether it's going to be in the physical or the human, but as you've got 10 marks in each, you'll have either the physical or the human, it will be a 2-marker followed by an 8-marker. And then on the other side, on the physical, if that was the physical, then on the human, you'll have short answer questions making up 10. I think on Spec B, it's 2, 4, 4, and Spec A, I can't quite remember, but it's more like 1, 2, 3, 3 or something. That makes sense. Doesn't quite add up, but yeah, up to 10 marks. So, but have a look at the practice papers, because it's very, very, that's how they'll be essentially. That's exactly how we'll set them. And there's 2 or 3 examples, so you can use those. Just a couple more questions then. Question, just going back to tags. Somebody's saying they're selling tags as mini mock revision sessions. That makes sense. Yeah, that's just preparing. I mean, I would just say you're preparing for the exams, but it could be used if there are no exams. Then obviously we can use it for your tags, so that gives them the incentive and the information they need to prepare. Will it be possible to send, this is A-level, NEAs to the moderator this year? Yes, in fact, you have to. It's all going to be asked for via Learner Work Transfer Portal. We're preparing some subject-specific guidance on how to do that at the moment, so that will be out either later this month or early February, and that will show you how you have to submit, and it'll all be done electronically, no hard copies. That's for A-level coursework. Can we use end-of-topic assessments from GCSE materials and transfer Pearson steps into the grades? Not sure what that means. I might have to get you to contact me on that one. If you email teachinggeography@pearson.com, I can come back to you on that. Last year for tags, we created a range of assessments internally to cover all the content and AOs. Will tag evidence this year need to cover all the content and AOs? So again, yeah, it needs to cover what you'd expect normally. So yeah, normally all the normal content across the normal AOs. Yeah, I mean, there may be exceptions if you haven't for some reason, delivered content. For whatever reason, then you just need to, you can't assess students on content that they haven't been taught. The aim is that's why you've got time to make, you just schedule these assessments so that you have covered it. But for whatever reason, if you haven't, then you don't have to, obviously. Thanks for putting the link in there for the sign up. That's brilliant. There's a lot of info. You might be missing something. Don't worry. As I say, you can follow up and ask me questions after this by emailing me at teachinggeography@pearson.com, and that's absolutely fine. You'll also have this PowerPoint. It might be a PDF that they send you, so you can use it as an aide-memoire. Go and have a look. I agree there's too much information. Ideally, you'd do a GCSE and an A-level one, but we weren't able to do that this time, unfortunately. Can I check GCSE is the option between cities and development? No, with GCSE A, the option, you have to do the cities, and the option is between development and resources. So section A is UK cities, I think it's called. And then you do that, section A compulsory, and then B and C is global development or managing resources. Centres declare the optionality chosen. No, you don't have to tell us. It's just like options, as you're used to, or you may be used to from previous exams or where they exist in A-levels or other specs. You can actually teach all the content, and students can choose in the exam which question to do. But obviously the rationale behind these changes is that students have lost time teaching and learning. So it's about giving them more time back to that teaching and learning so that they have more time to prepare for the exam. Just going to put the slide back on Edexcel B for somebody who can do that. Is that it? Is that the one? IGCSE. So we have got a session on international quals on Wednesday. So I suggest if you've got time to come along to that one, the question about international GCSE paper 2. But as you have mentioned it, IGCSE paper 2 section A, the option is 1 out of 3, instead of 2, that's correct. Where can we find the papers? I assume you mean the practice papers. So if you go to the support, summer 2022 support tab on the qualification page. So if you go to GCSE A, for example, Edexcel GCSE Geography, on that navigation across the top, right at the end, it says 2022 support. Click on that, you get a page, and then on the right-hand side is another sort of button that says Access 2022 support, and that takes you straight through to the list of documents for 2022 with all of the different practice papers. Edexcel B paper 2, will it be out of 70 marks? So it won't be 90, it's usually 94 marks. I think it's going down to 78 marks because you're losing 8 marks of I think it's 78 marks. You're losing 16 marks of familiar fieldwork questions. If it's electronic for NEA to be submitted, some of the graphs maps are larger than A3, photocopy or scanner, and so cannot make a whole thing digital. Demonstration of hand-drawn sketches, recommendation. So yeah, as I say, we're aware of that. So we're producing some subject specific except scanners, photos of handwritten stuff, graphs, anything like that. As long as it's digital and can be uploaded, that's fine. It might be that it has to be a photograph of something. Yeah, paper 3, GCSE A, still the same time. Referring back to previous comment, NEA submissions, that means all their work must be electronic. So all the work must be submitted electronically. So obviously lots of students do it electronically already. But if they do hand-drawn stuff, then they just have to scan it or take a photograph of it, somehow digitized so it can be uploaded. I've mentioned where you can find the practice papers on the qual page. Okay, right, I think I'm up to date with the questions. Sorry about the rattle through. Let's move on. And I appreciate it's a lot to follow. So I think we've done the Q&A there. So let's have a look at field work. We've probably covered off quite a lot of this. So no written statement this year for GCSE field work. You don't have to submit anything to us. And no questions about their own field work. None of that, evaluate your results and conclusions type of question, or tell us what one method you use. None of that. All unfamiliar. Obviously, we're still encouraging everyone to do field work because it's great. And it's, everyone loves field work, but we understand that it's not possible. It hasn't been possible to do it as we normally would like to. There's a summary then of the marks, and you'll notice there that the times haven't changed, but we've lost marks. GCSE paper A's usually out of 64, paper 3, and it's now 48 because we've lost the fieldwork marks. And GCSE paper 2, as mentioned in the questions, has gone down to 78. Fieldwork then, as I described, has questions have been rewritten to remove the familiar, but the unfamiliar questions are still there, but there's only 10 per topic. And you obviously get your usual choice of rivers or coasts, urban or rural. And each question will be set around a context. And GCSE B, exactly the same. Each question will be out of 10. And you get your choice of coastal rivers and urban or rural fieldwork. And each question will be around a context. And as I mentioned, the marks, that 10 marks will be 2 plus 8. And then on spec B, 2, 4, 4. So if in the physical it's 2, 8, then in the human it'll be 2, 4, 4, and vice versa. If it's 2, 4, 4 in the physical, it'll be 2, 8 in the human. And for spec A, it'll be similar, although I think we don't have 4-mark questions, we think we have 3-mark. Or it might be a 4-mark as in 2 plus 2. It can be 2, the 4s can be 2 plus 2. So it might be like state 2 ways. So it might not be a 4-mark question, which is it's really quite challenging. It might be state 2 things, or suggest 2 reasons, and then 2, and then get 1 plus development, 1 plus explanation for each. Anyway, have a look at the papers because that will show you exactly the format. So there, the support then. On the website then you'll find some FAQs, the infographic explaining all of this, summary of the changes in detail, the joint board exam guidance on fieldwork. What is really good for the fieldwork for GCSE is the getting familiar with unfamiliar fieldwork packs. They really do, they take you through the whole inquiry process, explaining, about and giving practical suggestions how you can deliver kind of field work in without, for the unfamiliar questions. So it really shows you kind of how you can prepare students for those unfamiliar fieldwork questions. So obviously useful anytime, pre-pandemic, but particularly when you can't go on fieldwork, so you can't actually kind of get them to go through the inquiry process through doing an investigation. These PowerPoints will kind of step by step take you and your students, they're student facing, so you can use them with your students, take them through the inquiry process, deconstructing that process and how it links to the exam questions, the different types of questions that they could get asked. So it's really useful. And there's one for each topic for Spec A and Spec B. So if you've not seen those, make sure you have a look at those. Again, they're on the website under 2022 support. And then I mentioned the sample papers showing all of this updated fieldwork questions for 2022. There's at least 2 examples for each spec. And then there's a full example paper showing the new optionality. So that's paper 2 for Spec A and paper 1 for Spec B. Obviously, that's not so exciting because it's essentially just a change of the rubrics and the mark totals. But if you want to use a full example, or you want to show it to students what it will look like in terms of those rubrics, then that's what you can use. Revision-wise, then, there's topic tests on the website. There are other fieldwork packs on the website that we developed before the pandemic, which include familiar fieldwork, but obviously you can use those with your year 10s, and you can also strip out the familiar stuff and use the unfamiliar stuff with your year 11s. So they're called fieldwork packs. Again, I think they're under guidance in the filters on the qual page, and the documents filter. I think they're under guidance. There's a brilliant key terms and languages documents, glossary type things on there, which are really good for revision. There's a Pace Yourself support guide for teachers, which is more about delivery. So it's not so relevant now. The assessment guides are still there. And then I don't know if you've seen, they've put them on, I tweeted about them and put them on the Facebook groups, but we've got these new knowledge organisers for both specs for all 3 papers. And they're going to be, well, the initial feedback we've had from teachers on social media is that they're really useful. And they were something we started work on about 18 months ago. And they were originally designed as catch-up resources, so something that you could use to help students catch up with lost learning. But obviously, I think increasingly they're going to be useful now as revision aids as we actually move back towards exams, hopefully in the summer. But do download those. So they are they're not under 2022 exam support, they're under topic booklets or topic guides. So if you go to the qual page, go to teaching and learning materials, and then you get your long list of document types, click on topic booklets, I think they're called, or topic guides, and then you'll see those knowledge organisers there, one for each component. Yeah, I think those are good. We have got some topical case studies on the IPC support COP26, and there's one coming out soon updating about bricks, which they're probably nice to have for A-level students or GCSE students rather than essential, but they're good teaching resources. Obviously those are 2 topical things that you might be delivering or want to start, use next year, build into schemes work and things and homeworks for next year. In terms of training, this has been a bit difficult with the pandemic and the shifting needs to kind of get a settled program, but we've finally got something in place now for them for this term. And you can see it there. You've got the supporting lower ability learners for both specs, paper 2 strategies for success event, job B paper 3 prepping students for making geographical decisions in March, and a job A paper 3 preparing students for investigating UK challenges. So those are available for booking on the Training for Pearson website. So if you, again, Google Training for Pearson or Training from Pearson, and you can find those links. Yeah, I should probably send out an email update as well with those links on to make it easier for people to find those. Okay, AS and A level then. So we had some questions, didn't we, about advanced information. So this is where we'll talk about that. But more broadly, just what is happening then. So fieldwork and NEA changes for last year have been carried forward. So that's, again, no written statement to say you've done those 4 days. We haven't got any familiar fieldwork questions in the AS exams. In fact, in AS exams, they now get a choice between answering a question on human or physical. They don't have to do both, unlike GCSE, where we still have to do both. You can collect primary data remotely for your NEA. And we've got this advanced information due to be published on the 7th of February, which lists all of the content that you need to know and understand and revise for these particular set of papers that are coming out in summer 2022. So the point of the advanced information is that students will be told in advance of the content that will be assessed in the exams. Okay, so not the topics, because we all know pretty much it's all compulsory, the topics in geography. It's not like some subjects where from one year to the other you won't be assessed on the whole topic. So it's more about which of the key ideas for each topic they'll need to know in order to answer the questions to help them manage their preparation. It's coming out on the 7th of Feb at the latest. There was this idea that it could be released earlier, but I think it's fair to say that risk that is subsiding day by day. So 7th of February, advanced information for A-level geography and AS geography. What's it to be used for and who uses it? Teachers and students can use it. It's supporting revision. It's not supposed to narrow your teaching. You're still supposed to teach the whole course, but that gives you that focus for preparing for the exam. You can't take it into the exam. There are no other changes to exam papers or questions at A-level. I mentioned with AS papers, we're taking out the familiar fieldwork questions and introducing an option of human or physical. The AA, by the way, won't provide detail that you can prepare questions and answers. So if you remember, it won't be like some of the pre-releases that we've had in previous specifications at A-level, where you're kind of given a kind of steer about what the question's going to be. It's just telling you, well, actually, you don't need this key idea for the exam this year. It's not going to be assessed, or you don't need this this bullet point. So it's that level of detail. This was published in October, this statement, and it's not very exciting, I'm afraid, but it just really clarifies what the advanced information is going to be, because everybody has very different ideas about what pre-release or advanced information or advanced notice means, and everybody comes to it with a very different imagination of what it's going to be. And unfortunately, we weren't allowed to publish kind of like a sample, like a sans version of it, because there were concerns that people might think it was the actual thing. So we've had to put out this statement, which says, I'll read it because it is important. It's going to be published for all exam papers, because if you talk to some of your other subject colleagues, they might say, oh, we're only getting advanced information for paper 1, not and paper 2, because it very much depends on the subject and the structure of the qualification. So we're going to release it for all of the exam papers, but it won't be by paper. It will be as laid out in the specification content. And it will list the content that is assessed by the exam papers for this particular series of exam papers, and it'll include the key ideas and bullet points within the specification and skills from the list, the skills list at the back. And they're going to be just presented in specification order, not in paper order or question order. All right. Now, we have a synoptic paper 3 in our A level. So obviously that draws on content from across the specification, and some of that content is also assessed in paper 1 and paper 2. So if that isn't mentioned already, if that's not included as part of kind of the topic, if you like, then the advanced information will provide notice of the additional content, key ideas and bullets that are also required for that synoptic paper that isn't covered elsewhere. So essentially, you will get you will know. So because it's slightly different, you don't need with the synoptic. You sometimes just need a kind of background knowledge of something. So with paper 1 and 2, you're kind of being assessed in depth in the content. So obviously, we'll release that content that's required for paper 1 and 2, and then if you need to know kind of that key idea for paper 3, because it's part of the scenario, the context, the issue, then we'll flag that as well. Okay, advanced information for AS won't cover the assessment of the unfamiliar field work, because that's already quite narrow because we've got rid of the familiar. So we won't highlight which content you need for that, which part of the inquiry process is needed to prepare for that, for the AS. So this is what it might look like. This isn't a Pearson spec, but this just gives you an idea of the specific. This is like an example of a hypothetical specification, and the advanced notice will look like a specification. It will give you the key ideas and the content as it does in the specification. But the very keen-eyed, eagle-eyed colleagues out there will notice that there is a 1B and a 1C listed there, but no 1A. So the assumption is that 1A, key idea 1A, is not going to be needed for the exam. So a bit of detective work is going to be needed by teachers and students when this comes out to kind of work out what to revise and what you don't need to revise. Any questions on that? Gosh, it's... Just having a look through. So I can put the links to the practice papers in the chat at the end, if that's right. Seems to be some difficulty finding them, which I totally empathise with. It's not very difficult to find stuff on our website. Someone's asking about GCSE A, paper 3, synoptic UK challenges question. Will that be altered to take into account that 2 of the human options are optional? Yes. So it's obviously, when you say altered, it's a question that's been written in the knowledge that there is optionality now in that paper, so that not everyone will do all of the topics in paper 2. So obviously the synopticity needs to take into account that some students won't have done one of the topics. For the NEA A level, are these going to be externally moderated this year? Yes. So if exams go ahead, which we expect they do, you will mark them, submit the marks, submit the sample of work through this digital portal, and then we will externally moderate as we usually do, or we used to do before the disruption. Gillian's asking, will there be one of these for each unit 1, 2, and 3? I think that's about the pre-release, the advance notice. There will just be one. I think there's just one. I haven't seen it, the actual one, because I'm not allowed to see it. But I think it's going to be, it'll be done as it's laid out in the spec. So we don't lay out by paper, do we? We lay out by area of content or something like that. It's a strange word, content area. it'll just be essentially an edited specification. The key ideas that are not required won't be there, and the ones that are required will be there. And just to warn you, obviously with A-level, questions draw on a lot of content, don't they? So there will be a lot of content in the advanced information, but I suppose it's identifying what's not there, and that hopefully will be supportive in terms of reducing the amount of preparation students need to do for the exams. Okay. I don't think I missed any questions. Will the knowledge organisers be released for IGCSE? We haven't done one for IGCSE, then for IGCSE or A-level yet, but I can see the need. So certainly on our radar to consider that. I don't see why not. I suppose it's just getting the having just got those out. GCSE ones were prioritised because that's the area where the content. The feedback is the content is the heaviest. This isn't just Pearson Edexcel, but across all the boards, GCSE is very heavy content heavy, isn't it, since the reform? So that's why those were prioritised. How is it fair that Spec A, Paper 3 is 48 marks and 1.5 hours, and Spec B is 78 marks? So I think the overall time and marks for both specifications is the same. The field work. So essentially, the field work is in Paper 3 Spec A, and that's they've had marks removed. They've had the same number of marks removed from that paper. It's smaller. I think it's 64. Yeah, because the field work sits in the smaller paper normally, the 64 mark paper, but it's also got the synoptic in it. So that's why it's still 64, but an hour and a half. And I think our Spec B, we have a 4 mark synoptic paper on Paper 3, which is an hour and a half. So that's the argument, is that it's exactly the same. Okay, right. Summary of the changes then. I'll show you the model. So essentially, usually Paper 1 has a fieldwork question in there, in the human and the physical. That's going to be removed. So Paper 1 will have no fieldwork. Paper 2 will have a fieldwork section bolted on. That's the human paper. Paper 2 will have a fieldwork section D bolted on at the end, with the physical and the human topics, options there. And that's because you get a choice. You only have to do one. So you only have to do either physical or human fieldwork and just do one question. So we had to have them all together in one section. A-level then, looking at fieldwork, no other changes to AS apart from the advanced information. Fieldwork can be done virtually, and data collection, primary data collection, can be done remotely or virtually. There are some coursework marking courses coming up, but there's a Q&A on the 10th of February, which I recommend you book on. And that's going to be with me and the principal moderator. So we can answer lots of questions around marking of NEA for 2022. There's going to be 3 pre-records released either this week or early next week, building up to that, which you can access about marking NEA. And then the live Q&A on the 10th of Feb. But these are some of the sort of things that will probably get asked about balance of primary and secondary data. And essentially, because students perhaps have not been able to go out and collect as much data as they might have done because of public health reasons and restrictions. We've allowed students to, or all the boards have allowed students to collect data remotely, and also, we're just re-emphasising that secondary data is also appropriate, but we do have to have some primary data, but the balance doesn't have to be equal. We've never defined how much primary data you have in relation to secondary data because it's nonsensical, depends on the title and the investigation you're doing. It's kind of because of the independent nature of it. It's all about how appropriate the data is to the investigation. We are saying that you do need at least some or one piece of primary data. So I think that summarises most of that slide. Are there any questions on A-level NEA, notwithstanding the fact that there are those events coming up specifically about marking? Okay, there's a couple of other questions another one about advanced information. Did you say you may produce advanced information for GCSE? No, there's no advanced information for GCSE. GCSE has GCSE Geography has the new optionality. The consultation did ask about advanced information, but it came out that for GCSE Geography that the optionality was what was going to be policy. But there are other GCSE subjects. A lot of other GCSE subjects are having advanced information, but we are having it for A-level Geography, advanced information. Are there changes in mark tariffs and timing for the A-level paper? No, there are no changes to the A-level paper. Just all we're having is the advanced information. I can see the fieldwork booklets on the summer support section of GCSEB, but not the knowledge organisations. No, the knowledge organisers are in topic booklets or topic guides. So that's in teaching and learning. So you go to GCSEB, click on teaching and learning tab, and then you get a list of categories. And if you click on topic booklets or topic guides, then you should get the knowledge organisers there. Okay, support for A-level then. Frequently asked questions, the infographic, the summary. There's a joint board guidance on data collection, which is essentially what I was just saying about remote data collection or virtual data collection being permissible. And there are practice papers for the AS. And then the training for A-level, paper 3, synoptic, preparing for the synoptic investigation on the 7th of Feb. As I mentioned, the live Q&A on the 10th of Feb on the coursework marking, the pre-recorded training on the new to Pearson Edexcel A-level is available. There's a really good video and a series of exercise activities for students called preparing for your independent investigation, better investigations, which is a pre-record, which is really good for students as they get ready to develop their titles and things. And then there's all the examiner feedback, which is pre-recorded. I mentioned this at the beginning, didn't I, about the mark schemes. So the mark schemes for autumn 2021 are coming out tomorrow. The November 2020 papers are being unlocked. A-level results day was last December, and GCSE results day for autumn 2021 is February the 24th. And the grading there for autumn 2021 will be similar as it was in summer 2021. There's a schedule for the release of the autumn exam papers. The summer 2029 papers have now been unlocked and are free to download. There's my contact details. Email teachinggeography@pearson.com, Twitter's Edexcel_Geog. There's a phone number there as well, and the sign up and the photo of me pre-lockdown when I used to go sunny places. This is something that I've been asked to share with colleagues, just trying to get colleagues who are interested in becoming examiners aware of the benefits. I'm not going to read it out, but I'll leave it there as we close off, and I'll answer any further questions. But it is the best way to understand our assessments, I think, to become an examiner. I know it's not the most sort of sociable working hours and a time of year, but I think if you have thought about it, then it's definitely worth taking the plunge, because I think it is useful. Have these been put on? So the plan is that the exam papers are going to be put on Exam Wizard. Yes, I don't know if they've actually been put on Exam Wizard at this point in time, but the plan is that they will be. I can also check and chase that for you, Joanne. Yeah, so I've had lots of feedback. Trying to apply for examiners is the hardest bit. So that is acknowledged. That's something I raise to senior managers every meeting that we have. And there is work going on to try and make that easier, because we can't kind of encourage people to become examiners and then the experience of applying be so difficult. So thanks for reminding me to remind colleagues that there's something needs to be done to sort that out. So I think there's an awful lot of information there. So do follow up with questions via email, and I'll answer them over the next couple of days. If you don't get an immediate answer, then you will get one this week. I'm just going to check the other question box. I think that's all covered. Great. Okay, so I'll leave the chat open. If anybody wants to put any other questions, do. And thank you for coming. There was a lot of information there. We've got the international one on Wednesday. So if you've got any colleagues who are teaching that, do come along. It's at 12 o'clock. And I realise I'm now sitting in the dark. The presentation will be sent out to you, but if you haven't received it in the next day or two, then do email and I'm happy to send you it. Thanks for the feedback about the knowledge organisers. Oh yeah, I'm just going to move. That's the contact details. Thanks, Fiona. Yeah, appreciate knowledge organisers for IGCSE. Good idea. IGCSE 1 during the school day. I appreciate that. It's very difficult with international because obviously different time zones. So it's slightly different contingency for international, and obviously the exam papers, the adaptations to the exam papers are different, although they're the same principles. So we've got optionality for the international GCSE, but on paper 2, where you're basically losing one topic, and the removal of the familiar fieldwork questions from paper 1 and paper 2, and the timings are not changing on the exam. So yeah, the principles are the same, but obviously marks are different, mark tariffs are different, and that sort of thing. And the exam questions, same idea in terms of the structure, and there is a few sample papers on the website as well, which you can look at. But the contingencies it's basically the same, but there are a few key differences. So maybe I'll send you, Caroline, if you email me, I'll send you the international version of this PowerPoint. And then you can, I'll highlight the key changes to you in an email. Okay, that's interesting about the knowledge organisers using different terminology. Is that the Spec B one, topic 2? Well, rest assured, we haven't changed the specification. Thanks for letting me know, Sean. So we haven't changed the specification, continue to use the terminology in the specification. If we change any terminology like that, and we would expect students to use different terminology, we would, in an exam, we would definitely make that very clear. We wouldn't do it by stealth via these knowledge organisations. So that looks like a bit of an editorial inconsistency, which I'll flag. It would be easy enough to get that changed in the knowledge organisers. Okay, I think unless there's any more questions, I'm going to close or ask Gino to close the session so that everybody can go off and enjoy the rest of the day, the evening, I should say. So once again, thank you very much for your time, and do get in touch if there's anything that you feel uncertain about, and best of luck with everything this term, and I'll catch up at the next briefing event.